World's End Club. This is the latest game from the people who made the Nine Doors trilogy and then Danganronpa Somewhat trilogy. I will get to the Danganronpa games when it comes to the Switch, which I'm sure I'm butchering the name, but I don't want to bother to look it up. Let me just say, I truly enjoyed 2 out of 3 of the games in the series. Maybe if I played it again, I might enjoy the 3rd game. That one felt like the creator was forced to make the game that he never really wanted to make. I played the first of the Nine Doors games on the iOS, which was actually just the story without the puzzles, and I found it interesting. I played it again when I bought the trilogy on Steam, and I finished Nine Doors again, but the sequel kind of bored me and I stopped playing it. World's End Club is a bizarre game. It feels like it never knows what it wants to be. The first part of the game is definitely bait and switch, but only if you come into it completely blind. They do make it clear from the trailers and anyone who talks about this game that the game of fate that happens to be in the very beginning is only to set the mood. The problem is the pacing in this game is just all over the place. Sometimes it has a compelling story to keep it going, other times it's just like a slog of text you dare not skip or you'll miss something, all wrapped up with occasional, mostly pointless platforming sections. This is a story about the Go-Getters Club. They're a group of students who go on a field trip and all of a sudden they see a meteor strike Tokyo. They all black out and they wake up in an underwater theme park. And they were forced to play a game of fate by a robotic mascot. Sound familiar? The game is clearly trying to pull in the people itching to play another Danganronpa game. And I will fully admit that's how it got me to play it. The mascot gives you 1 hour to complete a task. The only twist is that you don't know what your task is. One of the other characters knows it, and they're going to try and stop you from finding out, or they will lose the game and die. Now, the timer that you see above really doesn't matter, which is disappointing. You'll never get close to timing out. Even if you do run down the time, the next cutscene will just reset it back to where the game wants it. It was just there for flavor. You will be required to do some platforming, which a toddler might have some issues performing. Other than that, don't expect any challenges. In fact, the game offers a lot of checkpoints, so even if you do make a mistake, you'll have to be right back where you were right before you made the mistake. The title clearly doesn't care about any challenge in these sections, as it's really only here to make this not officially a book that you're reading. After you escape the facility, which really isn't a spoiler since it happens in the first hour of the game, you find yourself on the other side of Japan, with no one in sight and everywhere looking abandoned. And the Go-Getters Club decides to make their way back to Tokyo to see if their family is safe. Now, how do they do this, you might ask? They make the insane decision to try and walk over 1,000 kilometers to it. It makes no sense in the moment, and it makes no sense every second you're actually playing this. Why are they walking? There has to be a car somewhere on the roads or towns that they're exploring. Well, you might be saying, well, it's a bunch of kids. They might not know how to drive a car. Putting aside that one of them might have played a video game before and should understand the concept of push the gas pedal down, they have no issues figuring out how to run a train or a helicopter. But apparently a car is too complicated. The bizarre thing is that they go out of their way to explain every other odd thing that makes no sense. I had all kinds of notes about the insane decisions these kids made. Like, why are they always sleeping outside when there's houses and apartments they could break into? They decide to make an offhand comment that the places are too dusty and they'd rather sleep on the dirt-filled ground. Like, that makes more sense. They even make jokes about how the main character doesn't talk later in the game. I actually thought he was always talking and we just didn't hear it. They act like they understand him, but they actually clearly explain he just never says a word. Why do they always go to the kid who says nothing when it comes down to the decisions on where to go? There'll be a few times where you can take different story paths. I took every path so I could see the different parts of the story as it would happen. And I will say it's actually basically required to do it anyway if you want to finish the game. However, I did like the different ways the story would change if you took different paths. The main story would be the same, but you get different looks at the relationships of the characters. Now, this game is fully voice acted, which was great. However, some of the voices they chose to use were just grating to listen to. It would be like if I voice acted a game. You'd turn me off in seconds. The platforming sections, like I mentioned, were very simple, but they did break up some of the monotony of some of the story sections. Quite often you'd have to talk to everyone at camp, and it was some of the most boring dialogue I had to endure. You could skip the camp sequences, but I didn't want to miss any bit of the story, so I just went ahead and did it. Now back to the platforming sections. They would actually show off one of the new powers that the kids would get. When in danger, one of the kids that you're controlling would get a superpower. They might breathe fire, have super strength, defy gravity, all kinds of things. Quite happily, these platforming sections only last about 15 to 20 minutes, and then you go back to the story. Now, when the game is actively telling a story and not just having to stand around and talk to each person, it was actually quite enjoyable. There were a lot of twists I didn't see coming. Now, I did have issues with the last part of the game, as it felt like it got a bit silly with the reveals of some of the characters. I can't really talk about it, but it's nuts. Now, there were a couple anime sequences that were quite fun to watch, and it actually helped me endear myself to the characters. I just wish wish there were more of them. It took me about 15 hours to beat this, and I kinda like the story it told. I just wish it wasn't paced so terribly. I hated the camp sequences, and that was actually over an hour of the game if you add them all up. World's End Club is a visual novel with a few platforming sections. The game is broken down into small acts you can play, and I figured that's because it was originally an unfinished Apple arcade game. They finished it up for the release on the Switch, and the best thing I could say about this is that the title is okay. It's nowhere near as interesting as the previous games that they had made, so I would say you should just rent this, or get it on a really deep sale. You will likely find the platforming too simple to be engaging, but the characters are interesting enough to keep you on this journey. So if you want to play a visual novel with a lot of interactive elements, I would say rent it or find it on sale.